Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,400 comedians over the last 50 years. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today. It's the wonderful Jess Fostekew. Yay!
Oh, hi.
Hello,
Thanks for
how are
having
you?
me. Yeah, fine. Thanks for making me feel like I just walked on stage, even though I've just turned up to a podcast from my own home. That's lovely.
That's what I do.
Really nice.
Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Pleasure.
We're going to talk about your comedy career,
Yeah.
and it's going to last about 45 minutes to an hour, the interview, hopefully.
Okay. I'm
And
glad you said the interview because you made it sound like my career had that long left.
and I'd like to start off first by asking, please, how did you become a comedian in the first place?
Um, I'd say through morally bad ways. I didn't watch any live stand-up. There wasn't any to watch in Dorset where I grew up, not that I'm aware of. It just wasn't something that any of us were doing. Like it just wasn't on our radar. There wasn't really any on TV. It was pre-streaming and stuff. So I wasn't particularly aware of stand-up. And then uh I was in my early 20s. I was drifting around a bit. I finished university and didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And I wrote some sketches for like an open submission thing. I'd written it started with the BBC did a competition a million years ago called Finish This Sitcom. And I think they'd given you the first 10 minutes and you had to write the second 20 minutes. You had to end a sitcom. And there was some to choose from. And I enjoyed that. I wrote that with a friend who then went on to be the father of my son, actually. But then um, there was another thing off the back of that we wrote some sketches for, and we went to see them be performed live by, I now know probably jobbing comic actors. And there was some improv on,
Yeah,
short form improv. And I watched a lot of, um, oh God, come on, what's it called? Whose Line Is It Anyway?
yeah, yeah.
Growing up on TV. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize people did it live. It was so green. And I was like, I asked the people organizing it, could I have a go at that? And they were like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Desperate for people to be involved at the time. It was before improv was trendy and people did after work courses in it. And I ended up doing some improv in a really awful improv group called Mixed Nuts, MIXTNUTZ.
Oh,
Um,
I
and
like that.
the whole idea of the group was it was meant to be like diverse, but it was, I think there were two brown people in the whole group. It was pretty heartbreaking. Um, and but through that group, I met Carrie Ad Lloyd, and then we set up our own improv group. Not that she did with Paul Foxcroft, and that went on for a couple of years, and it was called the Institute, and it had Sarah Pascoe, Gemma Whelan, a bunch of people who've gone on to be Hollywood stars, and uh, and I loved that. And while we were doing that, I became really good friends with Pascoe. She started doing stand up, made it look quite cool and fun. And about a year later, I followed suit. And I think my motivations were bad in the sense that I thought, I might get more acting work if I do this. I might get more noticed as an actor if I do this. Um, which I think a bunch of people were doing at the time, and it made there quite a chasm when I started to stand up between stand-ups who are purist stand-ups and stand-ups who are actor stand-ups. Anyway, um, long story short, I had 2 minutes stage time, my first gig, and I was obsessed. I was head over heels in love. It's very, very, very addictive. So it started there, and then I very quickly went, right, just get out every night, just do it every night. I was 24 and I went and gigged minimum 3 nights a week for
So,
years.
so what sort of year did you start then?
January 2008.
2008. And can you describe your first ever gig?
Yeah, it was beneath a tiny bar that you wouldn't even notice was there, sort of opposite Liberties,
Right?
just off Oxford Street by
Yeah.
Carnaby Street. Um, and it was like a basement bar basically, and there were loads of acts. We all had 2 to 3 minutes. I think it was sort of set up as a competition. Um, Joe Bohr was
Yeah.
emceeing.
He's been on here, yeah.
Yeah. and God, who else was on? I remember Pascoe doing it
Yeah,
and winning it, I think.
yeah,
I think Julia Chamberlain might have been there to judge.
yeah,
Helen Arney, I remember being on. She started at the same time as me.
yeah.
She lives around the corner from me now,
Wow.
which is so fun. Like, yeah, it's lovely. I bump into her in the park now with our kids, rather
That's
than on the
lovely.
circuit.
That's
Yeah,
what.
yeah. And it
What
was,
if?
I just remember the thrill of it.
Yeah,
The 2 minutes just went like that. I pretty much
yeah.
had one joke. I remember being blown away by Pascoe's. I still remember this thing she did vaguely. I can't remember it word for word, so I'll butcher it trying to make it funny. But the idea was like, it was trying to control language, and she just had this lovely imagery of putting language in a pen, like in a farm. And I'm not going to do it justice, but the theory, like the idea behind the joke was so. And I remember thinking, God, I hope I'm that good a year in.
Well, you are. Believe me.
Well, I'm 16 years in, so here's
Well,
hoping better
no.
than that now.
I've been watching you for years, and what
Mm.
I love about you is that you make it look so natural. It's like when you
Oh,
walk on stage, it's like here comes one of my best friends. You're so
oh,
amiable, and so you're a wonderful deliverer of a gag.
oh,
They
thanks.
call it topping, don't they? Where they top a joke, and you're
Yeah,
superb at that. You get a laugh, and then you get another laugh, and then you get another laugh. And
thanks,
whenever I see
mate.
your name on a bill, I'm always delighted.
Oh, you pop it. Thank
Genuinely,
you.
I think I think you stand out, and as I said, I've been watching you for years.
Thank
Did
you.
you ever find it difficult at all to break through into comedy?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, did I
I don't
ever?
like the laughter with
I really did.
that.
Yeah. I took ages to do it. I wasn't one of the quick fire ones. It
So
was, I'd say it was about, well, if I started in 2008, and I think probably it was more of a slow burn than it looked like, but probably on paper, I did a show called Hench in 2019
yeah,
that
yeah.
I'd call a breakthrough show.
Hmm.
But actually, well, anyway, so that's 11 years. That's over 11 years, 11 and a half years to have a
So
break, to be able to then actually be asked rather than, but it's more complicated than that. Like it
yeah,
wasn't like nothing, 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 then that. I'd already started co-hosting The Guilty Feminist, but that was peaking around then. And well, no, that's not true. That's still massive, and I still do it. It's huge. It's bigger than anything else I've ever hosted, and it's but that was picking up momentum, I should say, in the
hmm,
years running up to that. 2 years before that, I just started. It had just started, I think, and I can't remember if I was on it yet, but I did a show called The Silence of the Nans.
yeah,
And actually, it's going to sound like such an idiot, but I think I was really proud of that show. And I think that's the first show I'd done that was good.
yeah,
Everything
yeah.
I'd done up until that point deserved all its 3-star reviews.
But
But that one, but Silence of the Nans, I thought, now I found my rhythm, I think, here.
I was just going to ask that. When was there a point where you thought I can do this? This is very good.
That show,
Yeah.
it's the first show I thought, and I look back and I think I had been retrospectively, I've been proud of the other ones, but I'd been wrong to be.
Well.
Because no, that's not true, but like there's lots of smaller ways of describing it. One of them is in every show I'd done up until that point,
Yeah.
I'd been a bit wild around it and a
Right.
bit it's insecure, really,
Mm,
and would do things like lock the show in months before Edinburgh. Like come May, I'd be like, right, learn it, and build up your confidence in it, rather than keeping on. To make something better, you smash it down and rebuild it. You smash it
yeah.
down and rebuild it, and it does come a point where you stop doing that.
Yeah.
But it took me until my 30s to learn to edit my work properly and have the confidence to know you can smash it down and rebuild it on the job if you need to. Like keep making it as good as it can be. It's never finished. And I think up until that point, all my shows I'd like locked in as finished really early, and it stopped them being as good as they could be. And they all had at least one bit in them that I dreaded doing because
Yeah.
it wasn't definitely going to work, not unless you built up a huge head of steam. Whereas from Silence of the Nans onwards, I've been a lot more perfectionistic, and I've not taken something on the road or to Edinburgh that I don't know. I think a lot more work had gone into it, is the
Mm.
best way of putting it. And it
Is
probably coincided with stopping having day jobs. alongside it, because it's really hard to work as hard as you need to or would love to on a show when you're juggling a bunch of jobs. Not that we're not now. I mean, a podcast is a job.
Yeah.
All the writing we do on top of our stand-up writing is a job, etc., etc., acting work, all the sorts of stuff that comes up. But and also, I felt like I was part of a factory line and I was churning out a show a year. And I wouldn't put myself through that now. But also
Yeah.
now you've got the luxury of hopefully touring with it and taking a full year playing with a show, even once it's finished. So it's a
That's what
really
they
different
normally
beast
do. They
now.
start off in Edinburgh, well, honing it up
Mm,
to Edinburgh. Then they do the Edinburgh run, and then they've
yeah.
got hopefully a tour on top of that.
Either an autumn or a
Yeah,
spring tour.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if your show is a surprise that it's gone well, you'll need to do a spring tour because they need time to organise it and get it on sale.
yeah,
That
yeah,
if you've planned for a good Edinburgh, you can go straight to tour in the autumn.
yeah,
So Hench was a surprise. So Silence of the Lambs was a surprise success, although it wasn't really a big hit in Edinburgh. No one came to see it, and it got some really funny mixed reviews. But I just knew it was good, and I said I'd love to do a tour, and I arranged with a brilliant producer who sometimes is an agent, sometimes is a producer called Georgie Donnelly,
yeah,
and she set me up. She was with a company that doesn't exist anymore that I loved called Rabbit Rabbit, and they set me up with a tiny tour, little 50-seaters. And I got the bug for that. I was like,
yeah,
this
yeah,
is
yeah,
lovely. People
yeah,
coming to see something specific.
yeah,
Um, and then by Hench, that was a surprise success. So I had an Edinburgh go really well, and then I toured it in the spring. With Wench, it was planned, so I did an Edinburgh and then an autumn tour. And now, for the first time, I'm about to go on tour with a show that will have, by the sounds of it, probably be done or be way into it by the time this goes out. But this is the first time I've done a show without an Edinburgh preceding it,
yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
different again.
You see, that's fascinating what you say because whenever I have seen you, and I have seen you for a long time
Mm,
now, there is this naturalness and there is this confidence on stage that is so warming to an audience. Have you
mm.
always had the ability to stand up in front of an audience and talk to them? And what do you particularly like to talk about on stage? Do you have any themes or anything like that?
Um, the first part, I'd say yeah, I'm not as confident outside of stand up at
Mm.
sort of public speaking.
Mm.
I was the best man at my cousin's wedding, and I that terrified me.
Yeah,
And
I've done that. It's horrible.
yeah, and when people assume I'm going to want to be performative in a
Yeah,
space like at my son's school or give a, do you want to go and give a masterclass on this thing or blah blah blah. Do you know what I mean? Like, or talk about comedy in this
no,
space.
no,
I'm like,
no.
no, I don't. That scares the hell out of me.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
stand-up's a really different beast. And no, I haven't always been confident at it. And when I first started stand-up, I think I was too frenetic and too aggressive, and it was all to mask nerves.
yeah,
And I think now I still use that because I think it's like an interesting and funny part of my
yeah,
personality
yeah,
is
yeah,
my
yeah, yeah, yeah,
sort of passions and rages,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
I'm in control of them now.
yeah.
Um, because it's just less scary than it used to be, basically.
I always remember I was on a training course years ago and I had to stand up and do teach somebody how to do something. So I taught them how to do the only card trick I know. And I hadn't performed the card trick for like 20 years. And when I stood up, I forgot it.
Oh God, that's the
It was just
worst
a
feeling.
nightmare.
Oh,
And the other
yeah,
one was I've had a go at stand up comedy myself.
yeah,
Years ago, I knew a promoter at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I said I think I'm quite funny in pubs, and I've seen a load of comedians. Can I have a go? And he said, yes.
mm.
This is a gong show we've got,
Oh God,
which has got old folk. It couldn't be worse. It was a rainy Monday afternoon, and I had this wonderful script, and I walked out. There's three old fellas in the audience, and I said, good afternoon, everybody. People think I look like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the ski jumper, but I can't see the resemblance myself. And when I did the thing, I was his absolute double. And one
yeah.
old fella at the back just went, fuck off and cut me off. I
No.
walked off to my own footsteps, and the promoter went, "Have another go." I said, "I don't know about that. Never say never again." But I think I found
Oh,
my thing in the audience, you know. But
what
so
a brutal.
it
I
is
don't think you should be
daunting,
allowed to
but
count a gong show as a gig.
oh yeah. But I can imagine it's all about experience. The more you do it, the more you learn. Obviously,
Yeah,
yeah,
basically. That's
yeah,
one of the things I love about it is that the harder you work, the better you'll get.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't mean necessarily the better you'll do,
No,
because past a certain point, it stops being that meritocratic.
yeah,
Um, and it becomes a lot more about, who's got buzz around them and who's noticed if you're good. There's loads of people who are brilliant, but nobody in the industry's
yeah,
noticed
yeah, yeah,
because,
yeah.
whatever it is about them isn't fashionable to them at the moment. And I really hate that about comedy, but I guess it's in all industries
Yes,
to
yeah,
some extent. And some of that from the industry sometimes is well intended, didn't used to be, but these days, people make choices all the time, not based on who would be the best person for the job, but other reasons, and some of them are good and some of them aren't. And what agents will represent you and who will get picked for this showcase and all of these opportunities and stuff. It's not necessarily fair. Who will win a competition, even like that feels like for stand-ups. I remember the early years there was a lot of like, God, I've got to try and win one of these competitions, get to the final of these competitions, but I never did great in them. And it felt similarly cruel to exams at school. You'd work really hard and you really understood the topics. Sometimes there were topics I loved, but I didn't do great in the exam because actually under
yeah,
that sort of pressure, it was like, I'm not articulating myself in a way that you want to hear it. And
yeah,
it felt
yeah,
the same doing competitions as a new stand-up. So, but I remember Nick Helm very kindly saying to me, don't live by these. Like, don't judge yourself as a comic on how well you do in competitions. All they are is a lovely pat on the back for the one person who wins. And they don't mean anything to anyone else. And they are different to those gong shows and stuff like that. They're so different to all other comedy, because in all other comedy, you're part of a team generally on a lineup, and you want everyone to do well. And it's joyful to watch everyone to do well. And it means the whole night's lovelier for the audience. And
yeah,
and actually it's great. And also, even once you're touring, you want the best for everyone. Whereas in a competition, even if you want well for everyone else, you sort of want to beat them. And for me, it kind of ruins something about being a comedian, being part of
yeah,
a
yeah.
competition. And that counts in Edinburgh as well, actually. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it makes it a really difficult environment to be in because by proxy of being there, you've entered a competition and it's like, oh, it just sort of changes your motivations and
yeah.
it makes it a bit harder to keep
You want
your
to be
sanity.
free on stage, don't you, to say what
Yeah.
you want, as opposed to
Yeah.
being tense or
Yes.
not free, relaxed on stage, I think is the
Mm.
word. Whereas if you've got any, I don't know what the word is, but if you've got any pressure from a
Yeah.
competition, it's sort of like you don't feel you're giving your best, even although you may well be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's just your motivations are all skew
Yeah,
if. So you can
yeah,
be having a gig every day where
yeah,
your audience are laughing for an hour, they're coming away feeling great and empowered and or whatever. They're coming away just like having watched something they loved for whatever reason. And that should be it. That
yeah,
should be
yeah,
you.
yeah,
And and you can even be doing that to full rooms. You
yeah,
can even be not losing money. You can
yeah,
even,
yeah, yeah,
but do you know what? There are comedians. There was a comedian the last time I did the Edinburgh in 2022 who had 5 stars and everything. He was having what on paper looked like, to me, the Edinburgh of your dreams. It literally was 5 stars across the board, full rooms, extra shows, people talking about it, everyone wanging up. No one had a bad thing to say about it. Audiences sweating, crying on the way out every single day. And he was miserable and doesn't ever want to do Edinburgh again because he didn't win the prize or didn't get nominated for the prize.
amazing.
And that's what it does to you. It makes you Gollumy, makes you all like my precious for this one thing. And that's so shit. He had an
Yeah,
objectively beautiful Edinburgh with a beautiful
yeah.
show, and he should have been allowed by the universe to come away feeling incredibly proud of himself for that. But that's
It's
not how it
weird
works.
because
That's why I don't like it being competition. It seems to trump everything else in too many comedians' minds,
very
not
much so. Yeah,
unreasonably,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's oversold to us as And also, some people can get nominated and win it, and it doesn't change anything.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
even
yeah,
the
yeah.
golden chalice it's promised to be. I feel like I didn't answer your question about whether there's things I like to talk about on stage. And yeah, there are, and it changes over time. But like, I spent a lot of time talking about who I am in the world, and over the course of the last, definitely since Hench and Wench, I've increasingly, I think, been moving into, well, if that's who I am in the world, what does the world look like? And I think I'm really leaning into that a lot more in my new show, Metal. Like, I feel like I've hit 40 and I'm ready to stop talking about myself, pull my head out my ass, and look at what's happening in the universe and talk about that instead.
That's why I'm doing this.
Finally,
I'm 57 this year.
congrats. You're doing like a
That's why
day
I'm
over
doing this. Doing
56.
passionate thing about
Yeah.
it. When I first started the blog, I didn't have a clue, blog or the podcast,
Mm,
and I got an invitation to go on half-day writing course, which
okay.
was through the woman who runs what's it called? Amuse News.
Oh, right. Hills Jago.
Yeah, yeah. And I'd never met her, and I went along, and there were six people around me, all wanting to be reviewers, and me in the middle, and she berated all of them. I mean, that really, oh, you won't be any good at doing it. And she came to me and she said, we can't remember why you're here, because she invited me, and well, I said, I'm not a diarist, I'm not a reviewer, I'm not a reporter. I'm a member of the audience out to have a good time, and I hope my blog is very passionate about my cause to support the comedians. She never bothered me again.
Good. Oh, I thought you were going to
It's
list the
just a
ways in which you
joyous
found to
thing, you know.
slag that off. Blimey hell, Hills.
But I just thought, as soon as it turns in, from my point of view,
I'm
as soon
chuffed to
as it
bits to
turns
find
into
out
a
that she's run a
business.
course to smash down future reviewers. That's fun because
But I'm,
she's got form for making comedians not feel great about themselves.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. It's like,
it's comical if she's also done that for.
don't don't do it. They're
Just
there
don't
to
do it.
say what they want to say.
Don't
Let
do
them
it.
say
Yeah,
it. Comedy is subjective.
yeah.
I know my blog can be criticised for me liking everybody, but it's my experience of going, and it's such a
Lush.
joyous thing that why not spread it, and everybody's happy, because
Yeah, come on.
it's amazing. Anyway, let's move on. I was just going to say, what is your view of comedy competitions? You just answered that for me.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
go back to the nerves. Do
Mm.
you suffer from any nerves before you go on stage? And if so, how do you cope with them?
Yeah, it's changed over the years, but
Yeah,
there'll always be something that makes me nervous. And there's always some nerves, there's always some adrenaline. And I think if that ever vanishes, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You need it. You need that wind in your sails, I
yeah,
think, as
yeah.
a comedian. But they were enormous to start with. I'm not as bad as others. I had a million years ago, he was my boyfriend, but my friend, he did a he's called Toby, and he did a character called Dr. George Rygold, and he, before he went on stage, would fully retch, like whole body like heaving until the seconds where it was hard to watch. Like, like really, he would be impossible to talk to for hours before a gig, and then he'd be physically, his body was rejecting his
Yeah,
soul for before he went on. And then the second he was on stage, vanished, gone, and then happy as a clam after gigs. However they went, he wasn't someone who overanalyzed
that's weird, isn't
afterwards. So it was a fascinating, like awful physiological reaction to that sort of nerve. And I remember thinking, okay, I haven't got it that, I haven't got it that bad. I
it?
just get sweaty hands and I yawn a lot, and I have an internal voice that goes, don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. You don't want to do it. That's what my nurse does to me. Don't want to do it. You could be at home with your son. I have like a little gremlin voice. I'd be like, you don't want to do it. You don't have to do it if you don't want to do it. But I went through years of having a thing going where my head would say to me, you can just walk off stage whenever you want. Who cares? It's only comedy. And actually, that's weirdly reassuring in a way that you've got way more choice than you think you have. Like
Yeah,
if you have one of those horrible moments, like where you forget, like you were saying at the The magic trick, like if you have a thing where you forget it, I mean, in reality, if you forget a bit on stage, you start talking to the audience or you move on to
You've
another
got the
bit. Or
audience
these days,
proper
most comedians will go, forgotten my bit.
Yeah.
If you're at a lovely friendly gig like ABC or something, be like, what was my bit again? You can probably get the audience to help you. But and even if I was about to say, if you're recording something for telly, you'd want to be more slick. But actually, the telly's are the slickest gigs, least slick gigs ever, because if you're recording something for telly,
Yeah.
you can go, I'm going to say that again, and you're going to laugh again, please. Like, because it's edited. So I don't know.
Would you
Yes, I
say
get really nervous, and every time I think, oh, okay, so that I find it interesting when I notice that a gig that used to make me very scared no longer does.
Yeah, that's
But then there'll
interesting.
be a level up, and I remember the first time I played it. First time you play to over 100 people, you're scared. The first time you play to over 500 people, you're scared. I remember doing some tour supports, before Silence of the Nans. I remember doing a few tour supports for Sarah Pascoe in rooms that were about 500-600 seats at the time, and being like, whoa, this is so funny, because I was preparing for an Edinburgh in a 60-seater and thinking if even a tenth of these people came, I'd have a full room, like, and being really and really enjoying that. But and then you get comfy in that size room. And then I remember doing a tour support for Catherine Ryan, I think at the Cambridge Corn Exchange, which is thousands,
Yeah.
and being fucking terrified and not being quite able to stay in my body. That's what happens to me when I get very scared, is I feel like I'm watching myself do the gig from somewhere slightly above me. And you can't be your best as it's fine, because generally you'll be doing material inside out, and you're not phoning it in. It's not that you don't care, but you can say the words and leave the right pauses and people laugh, but you're not really present. So the danger is, if anything happens in the room that you need to address, there's this like friction where you're desperately trying to get back inside your body to be back in the moment. And that's what nerves do to you. It's this weird kind of mechanism. And actually, in those fearful moments, I think one of the things that can pull me back into my body is going, you don't have to do this. Like, you can walk off. I watched someone, when I recorded my Live at the Apollo, which was like, so scared before that, but like
good.
buzzing. Somebody else on the lineup that night, which you'll have never seen in the edit, obviously, kept walking off stage to get a sip of water and recollect themselves.
Wow.
And I was like, that's so interesting. Like, the world doesn't end if you stop.
Yeah.
It's only jokes in a row. It is worth remembering that.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing to do with nerves is, and I talked about it actually in Silence of the Nans, in a breaking of the fourth wall way, because sometimes a gig is going to be hard for whatever reason. And generally there's a correlation with the better paid the gig is, the harder it's going to be. And I don't mean that, it's not always true, because you can get, generally in your career over time, you'll get paid more to do lovelier gigs. So it's worth carrying on because of, these days you get a better fee than you would in a club to go and do a gig at the Clapham Grand for Berk's Nest, or in a lovely theatre in Dulwich for Plosive, or for ABC. You've got these lovely gigs, and those gigs will be slightly better paid than the club gigs of a weekend, and for a nice audience. So this doesn't always ring true, but generally, if something's really well paid, it's a corporate, it's a cruise, it's I got offered, I think, £400 to do a preview once, and I should have gone, what is wrong with that? It turns out, I was on at 10 o'clock at night in a posh village, and they'd plonked me on at the end of a classical music festival. Death, certain death. Like, it's, it was all old men, and half of them were asleep. Someone shouted, Stuart Lee. I was like, no, never said I was, you fucking weapon. It was horrific. And at one point in the gig, I went, what's funny is, you hate me and I hate you. It was awful. Like, so generally with those gigs where once you get there, oh God, here we go. You need to, because that gives you extra nerves, that actually, it's that nerves, it's doom, it's dread. In those gigs, and just sometimes the ones where you're just tired and it feels like work to be there.
Yeah.
You can, I think, or I can, most of the time, flip a switch to choose to have fun.
Yeah.
You can't choose to have a good gig. That's not up to you. But you can choose to have fun on stage. And that's how I made that one it was in Aldborough, fun for while I was on stage, is to go, I'm just gonna be honest with them. I'm gonna tell them that I'm not meant to be here. And and just be and enjoy myself. Because it will tickle me to tell them I hate them.
Would you
And that
say?
I know that they hate me. It's and I think actually, if you're watching someone have fun, you don't get to come away having had a traumatic time
Yeah,
and
yeah,
saying, God, stand-up's awful, isn't it? Isn't all stand-up awful? Or aren't all women not funny? Or aren't, you don't get to come away with a big blanket opinion of
yeah,
everybody's terrible time. If you watch someone have fun for an hour, you can think they're mad because that wasn't funny. Can't believe how much they had fun there because I didn't find
yeah.
that funny.
Exactly. Yeah,
But you can't be like, oh, it was hard to watch,
yeah, yeah.
because it's fun to watch someone have fun.
Would you say when you walk on stage, when you speak into them, when you first speak into a microphone, is that when the nerves go, or is it the first laugh, or is that not the case?
Mm. Yeah, I don't think it's as simple as that for me. I
No.
think every gig's a little bit different. And there
Yeah,
could be gigs where you're having a lovely I emceed a gig last night, which I try and do like 3 or 4 times a year to keep my hand in,
yeah,
at least that at least that often. But I'm saying that because I'm touring this year, so it's not going to be like that. But I will MC at the beginning of my tour shows. Anyway, uh I think like that was an interesting one where actually the first section felt like work. But I came on for the second section and they were like a different audience. They just
yeah,
needed to work out what was going on and they needed a bit of gentle coaxing. So I'm glad I didn't judge it on the first section because by
yeah,
the
yeah,
second
yeah,
section, just saying hello got a laugh. And you're like, well, now you've got two kind, it's getting, you've got to try. It depends. It's not always an audience's fault and it's not always anything to do with what you're doing. You've got to find each other's energy a bit.
yeah,
I'm so high energy if I'm really playing and having fun that I sometimes I need a few minutes to calibrate to their energy. If they're shy, if they've got like Monday, bank holiday Monday night energy, I've got to force myself to start really slow and be really patient. And it's worth it because if you go into, then they're like terrified and
yeah.
knackered. So, and I've made that mistake. Like you've got to learn from your mistakes and you've got to treat each gig as its own fragile beast.
That's
So I don't,
wonderful.
so
That's
sometimes it
perfect.
takes ages to really relax or
Yeah,
to
yeah,
stop being really present and flexible.
yeah. Let's move on to the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to take my holidays and go to the Edinburgh Fringe every year. This is my 18th year, something like that. Started in
Amazing.
2005, and I've branched out into other festivals as well. Tell me about your first Edinburgh Fringe. Did you go up as a punter, or were you in part of a show, or did you do a solo show straight in? What was it like for you?
I'd never been as a punter. I wish I
Yeah,
had. It wasn't something like my family did really, or any of my friends. But it was 2006, and I was in that improv group, Mixed Nuts. Mixed Nuts. And
that's a great name.
it wasn't great. We were in the Gilded Balloon and we were taken up in sort of week-long shifts.
Right.
But we were put up in a awful shared flat with tens of us, several of us in a room, but all adults who really resented having to live like that. Um, oh my God, who else was in that group? There was a brilliant guy called Nick. There was, yeah, Chizzy, actually. She's a captain on Sorry I Didn't Know on
Right.
ITV.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
hadn't seen her since Mixed Nuts until I
Wow.
recorded this. But yeah, she's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah,
But we were all up, and you'd be up for a week or 2 weeks, but you'd do like every other show or something.
yeah.
It had very small audiences, and it was a real bad show. I hope that's okay to say. The guy who ran it, Dish Dad, is lovely, but oh, it was rough. It was a rough old ride. But I got the bug for seeing other staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went around watching things. Then the next year I was in a thing called Shakespeare for Breakfast with Sarah Pascoe and Gemma Whelan and my friend James Witt. And oh,
Wow.
we had a real laugh
Yeah.
doing that. I was Puck. And then we had to do a really dog shit kids play as well afterwards, which we really didn't want to do. And it was always to about 4 or 5 people in the same huge room. You'd just done a full Shakespeare to breakfast for breakfast too. Fascinating first few years, but it wasn't like big nightlife. I the big yeah yeah a
What
very
was your first solo show then when you went up there?
luxury tramp in 2011. So
Right.
before that, I did a year where I did 2 different half hours with different friends shared on the Free Fringe,
Yeah.
and then I took luxury tramp to the Gilded Balloon for my first hour. Um, I I had to borrow lots and lots of money to do it, so it felt very high pressure.
It's disgraceful, the cost and everything. That's
The
another
first few
story.
Edinburghs were
Yeah.
really bad
Yeah.
for me. I think it genuinely, I look back years later and went, you could have bought a house
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's such
With
a
the deposit,
shame
you could have had a
because
deposit for a
yeah,
house if you
yeah,
hadn't sunk
because
that and borrowed that money and left yourself in debt. I'm
yeah,
very lucky that I left myself in debt to friends and family rather than banks.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
and the privilege to have friends to borrow that from.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, rough. But first one was good numbers wise. We still lose money. I think first one lost. First one did, I think, pretty sold out, but it was a tiny little room. The overhead's so massive. I think I lost 8 grand or invested 8 grand, whatever, lost. Um, but yeah, also that year, you know, no regrets. Everything I think happens for a reason. But the friendship group I was in, the relationships I was in at the time, I we went out. Your show would be at 6 or 7, and then you'd be out in members' bars talking to other comedians about comedy
Yeah,
until 4 in the morning
yeah. That's what
every
I
night.
do. That's what I do. They reward for the podcast. Certainly in the last 2 or 3 years, the blog and the podcast is I get recognised wherever I go.
Yeah.
And when we went last year, I was shattered. I go with a load of friends, and they
Mm.
went off, and I was leaving with them. And Hal Cruttenden walked in, and I'd just seen his show, and he said, "Are you up for a beer?" And next thing, I'm in a members bar, and there's his
Yeah.
burn and all the rest of it. And I bought Hal a beer, and we sat down, and he said, my show this year, this was last year's show, was all about divorce. And he
Mm.
said, it's quite a tough subject, he said, but to see someone like you in the audience having so much fun, it makes it all worthwhile. It's so joyous. And
Yeah, it is.
then he said, how old are you, Rich? He said, have you ever been married? I said, well, I've had relationships and I've nearly been married once or twice. But I said, because I'm independent, I don't think I could do this if I was married, go around all the shows and everything. He said, I can't believe you're 57. He said, we'll have to put a review on for you when you're 60.
We
And I'm
will.
like, oh yeah, sure. That
That's
would
a
be
great
wonderful.
idea. Hal, if you're watching, I'm up for
but it,
that.
but it's this recognition.
Yeah,
It's
it's
lovely
lovely.
because I've been going so long, and there's such a buzz. Certainly from a punter's point of view, if you're into your comedy like I am, when you step off that train at Waverley, it just hits you,
Yeah,
and then from then on, your liver gets a battering, and you need
yeah,
a holiday when you come back because it's like 5
yeah,
a.m. every night, and oh my God,
yeah,
who's this? It's the best thing, and now I love to go to other festivals as well. So
yeah.
I go to Brighton, I go to Hastings. I went to Hull for the first time in November, and of
Great.
course Leicester. I've been to 3 or 4 times. I will see you in Leicester. I know this is being recorded in January,
Yay!
but I will see you in Leicester. I'm
Oh,
definitely going to the
great.
Hoovering podcast.
Yay.
And I know you've got your show in the evening as well.
You've got
So
loads more chances to see my show though if you've got
yeah,
other things on
yeah,
and
that's the
stuff.
thing. But certainly the Hoovering podcast, which
Yay.
I was gonna ask you where did that come from, because I have seen that before and it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Oh,
Just
thanks.
because I saw it at South Bank with Joe Brand.
Oh,
Joe Brand was on the
amazing.
guest. Well,
Yeah,
how
and
did
Jay
that come
Rayner.
about?
It came about from I overheard someone being derogatory in a derogatory way, talking about their friend, saying, "Well, she doesn't like food, but she likes eating." And I thought, "Oh, that's
Don't we
interesting,"
all?
because I think, well, this is it. And I thought, oh, so I just thought that was so, it got my head whirring. And that's often how it works for things, I think, for me. You overhear something or you witness something, you go, what's jarring with, why is that jarring with me? Like, that's complicated, isn't it? And I thought, that's me. I am foodie.
Yeah.
I hate the word foodie, but I thought, I love food, but we all say we love food. Of course, basically, there's not many people who go, it's just fuel to me. Most of us take joy from food, but it's much more transgressive and interesting and actually feels like a bit more sort of feminist and daring, especially as a woman, to say, no, I love eating and I'm hungry and I eat loads. It doesn't have to taste nice all the time. There's times where it's the act that is just, I just want to eat loads. And and I thought, and what, how funny that was like a little throw of shade about someone. It's like, well, she doesn't like food, she just likes eating. And I was like, what's wrong with that? So I started a podcast not about food, but about eating to explore the complexity of it for
Yeah.
people. And some of the episodes are just completely silly fun. Um, and it's really been on a journey over the years. I've been doing it for 6 years. And when it started, I was flirting with veganism. And so there was a lot of stuff about environmentally things. But then all through the course of that first year, I started to go on a bit of a journey to disentangle my own disordered eating history, and then discovered the sort of anti-diet movement and intuitive eating. And my life was revolutionized. Like, it was, I got free from what had been a lifetime of obsessive attempts at controlling my body. And that led in part to Hench as a stand-up show. It all sort of happened at, it was all, that was what was going on with me at that time. And then in the years following that, I sort of really lent into that movement, talked to lots of experts in, that side of things. And then it's balanced out. And the funny thing is, it's sort of come full circle. I still lean into that in January because I think there's a lot of horrible noise in the world that I like, enjoy being able to counter a little bit. But also because I'm so into my PE these days, I
Yeah.
talk to lots of people in sport and fitness, and I do talk to lots of people in nutrition. But I've done the podcast for so long that some of the people I talk to is like the latest guru. I did an episode with Tim Spector of the Zoe, and he now is like basically cancelled by anyone sensible in nutrition. All the nutritionists online are like, he's jumped shark. Like, he's saying mad shit now. It's like he's gone full loon. He's saying stuff like, you have to have 3 coffees a day. You are better off drinking Coca-Cola than fresh orange. Like, he's just saying mad shit to get clicks and likes now. And it's like, oh God, how funny that, like, I caught him on the up and up. And he's like, he's basically a lunatic now. It's been going so long, it's been on this real journey. And right now, I'm obsessed with food waste and the climate crisis. So
Yeah.
I'm really leaning into that. I think I might, so this year I'm going to talk to as many experts as I can about improving our food systems, activism, what we can do personally, etc., without obviously making anybody feel shit about themselves or obsessed with it. Like,
Yeah.
food, I want to get into the politics of eating a bit more this year. It's a broader way of putting it, as opposed to the personal politics of eating. So it's been on a journey, and it's still an absolute joy to do. And it's a privilege to talk to someone for 4 years, once a week, and now fortnightly, in detail about their relationship with eating. I've learned so much from it.
Well,
Yeah.
it's so good, and long may it last,
Thank
because
you.
I am a follower of it, and I
Thank you.
absolutely love you on it, and I love the idea of it. It's like this. It's who'd have thought that a member of the audience would create this blog and podcast, and
Yeah.
it just takes off. It's
Yeah.
And I think it's unique in what we do. I don't know whether there's any specific one about eating as opposed to food.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, I think this is unique from an audience point of view.
It's
You
brilliant.
sort of
It's so
don't.
lovely.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well done you, and
Thank you.
keep going with it because it's such a good cause.
I
Um,
will.
who are your comedians? Your favourite comedians, past and present?
Oh, my crumbs. There's so many. It's easier
Did you
to
have
talk. It's easier
comedy
to tell you
growing
the
up?
two or three I don't like. Um, I love loads of them.
Yeah.
I didn't know growing up. The only comedy I watched ever on telly was Tommy Cooper, so I did impressions of him. I loved him.
Wow.
I did impressions of Tommy Cooper for my family as a child. I was bought a Fez, I think, and I did
Wow.
impressions of him. Um, Old school, isn't it? I'd do that for my nana
I
and
saw
granddad.
Tommy Cooper live.
Wow.
My first ever gig. I'm celebrating 50 years watching stand-up comedy this year. First ever gig was 1974. Was Les Dawson on holiday with the
Brilliant.
family, and a year later, same place in Scarborough, we saw Tommy Cooper, and he walked on stage. There was a bed on stage, and there was one woman in a packed audience crying with laughter. He's lying on this bed as the curtains open. He's lying on a bed, and after about 5 minutes, nothing happens, and this
Yeah.
this trickle goes right round, and everybody's crying with laughter.
That's
Nothing,
just clowning at its
literally,
absolute best.
nothing happens, and then he
Yeah.
pops his head up with perfect timing, and he goes, "What? What? Has somebody come on?" And it was genius.
Fucking hell, what a
Just
legend.
genius. And the second half, he walked on to thunderous applause, and
Yeah.
he just went, "Thank you very much, good night," and walked off. Now,
Thank you very
I always
much.
think about him. The reason
Oh,
why he was funny was he didn't realise how funny he was, or that was the persona he gave, and that
yeah.
was why he was hilarious. He
I
knew
think it's
exactly what he was
brilliant,
doing with the
brave
tricks.
clowning, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it was superb.
I remember watching going to see Tig Notaro at the Fringe
Yeah,
way before I started stand up and having like an out of body experience at how extraordinary what they were doing was
yeah,
walking around. They just didn't say anything.
yeah.
They walked around stage for ages looking confused and then
I love that.
just started putting stools out around the side of the audience and then like going what and then putting them all back again. It took about 20 minutes. We were dying. And like you said, one person starts
Yeah.
and then that's it. And why is it funny?
Why is it funny?
It's so good.
Yeah,
And then wildly, she just went into a normal stand-up show then.
yeah. With
And I was like, oh, what has just
it's
happened to me? It was, you feel like you've been
it is
tricked in the best
extraordinary.
possible way, don't you?
It's things like that that you remember. I remember age 7. I remember my dear old grandma, my mum, dad, my brother, and me, and my granny all went to see Les Dawson on holiday, and my grandma was late for the show. And she had to crawl down in front of the stage, and he took the piss out of her. And the
Oh,
encore, he's done it many times, but the encore, he walked out and he went, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're very privileged today to have the chairwoman of the Women's Institute for Scarborough in the audience today." And he pointed to my grandma, went purple. And he went, "She's 111 years old today, ladies and gentlemen. It's her birthday. She's been let out of the home. Come on, everybody, let's all sing happy birthday." He started playing badly on the piano, "Happy Birthday," and everybody's joining in. And
yeah.
halfway through, he looks to the wings. He goes, "What? What? Oh, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. She's not 111. She's ill." And the curtain comes down. And my grandma was like, "Oh my God." And it's things like that
Oh,
that I
great.
remember. I remember first time going to see Harry Hill 30 years ago. He still holds the record for the greatest opening line to any show I've seen. It was downstairs at the King's Head. He brushed past me. He was late for the show, stood up on stage. He went, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sorry I'm late for the show. I had to have a testicle brought down." And then he got a laugh. And then he said, "From Derby." And when I met him 25 years later, I'd never met him before. I went, I told him that story, and he went, "I still tell that to this day." You know, so
Oh
there,
yes, good
there are
man.
so many
I love it.
favourite
Oh,
comedians
I've
of
got
mine.
so I remember seeing Miles Jupp at the store.
Oh yeah,
Come on, and I'm not going to do this justice, but I remember him coming on and saying, "It, I'm privileged," and then just leaving it there.
there's so many great lines. There's so many
And that was
moments.
before like
Yeah,
privilege was something all of us were
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about. It was so funny to hit that
I
timing in such a rowdy
Oh,
room
it's
as well.
brilliant. I'd
Glorious.
never met Frank Skinner, and I met him at last year's Fringe,
Mm,
and he walked out with his manager, and I thought, oh, no, I'm never going to get this opportunity
mm.
again. I'd just seen the show, and I went up and I said, I'm such a big fan, and oh, thank you, and I said, okay, if we have a photograph. He said, oh yeah. He said, thank God. He said, I thought you were going to ask for a refund. Still on, and that's the magic
Yeah.
of it, you know.
Mm.
Anyway, like me, following on from that, like me, I think you said before, do you go to a lot of gigs as a member of the audience?
Yeah, as much as I've got time for, I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I never let it go too long. Oh, what have I got tickets for coming up? I'm going to see Ian Smith's show
I
from last
love
year's
him.
Fringe.
I love him.
Yeah, I think he's the funniest person to have ever done a news quiz. I think he's
Yeah, yeah.
extraordinary on that.
Have you, have,
Brilliant
have you,
stand-up.
have you listened to his
But he's
podcast,
nailed that
Amy
show.
Glenhill?
I listen to it if I know he's
Northern
on. Yes,
News?
yeah, that's
Yeah,
really funny. His
really
podcast with
funny.
Amy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's so
Um,
good, so good.
I've got tickets to Frankie Boyle later in the spring.
Yeah,
Taking my dad and brother and sister to that as
that'd be
their Christmas
brilliant.
present.
He's so
I
good.
think I just think stand-up's brilliant, but also I think the articles he writes are as funny as um, most people's whole tour shows.
Yeah,
I just think it's brilliant. Yeah, he's someone I think is incredible. Um, I try and see all of Sarah Millican's shows. I think she's a genius. I
yeah,
think she's one of the greatest comedians to have ever lived.
yeah,
Um, I her the I in some ways bemoan the era of the reel and TikTok for stand-ups because I think it's so hard for stand-ups starting now to have to produce content in that way to feel like they need to do that to find an audience. But where I think it's beautiful is where comedians who've been incredible for years get to put stuff on there and
yeah,
like completely like level up their career, like Jeff Innocent or Jen
yeah.
Brister,
Oh,
to go suddenly to millions of
yeah,
followers online
yeah,
and suddenly to huge tours all over again.
yeah,
And Sarah has got such a her stuff's been sort of tailor made for it because she does short bits
yeah,
that are all shit hot, and she's
yeah,
got hours and hours because
yeah.
she's so prolific. And her Instagram output is like worth being on the platform alone for. I'm yet to see a reel that hasn't made me nearly piss with laughter. It's so brilliant. Um, uh, and then there's loads of comedians who, oh God, I always see Lou Sanders. I wouldn't ever
Yeah,
miss a show of hers. I love Luke McQueen.
yeah,
I wouldn't ever. I love seeing Amy Gledhill's work. I
love it.
think. Oh God, I try and see loads, but time doesn't always allow it. I think I went through, if I'm at the Fringe, I had years of, I think, naively thinking, oh, you got to get your head in your show. And it is really exhausting. I can never see the show that's in my venue before my show because there's something very weird about getting your head in the right, pulling yourself out of audience mode and back into performer mode in the same space. And watching a show is weirdly tiring, as you'll know.
Yeah,
Like you're laughing for an hour, it's
yeah,
quite hard to then perform. So I need to leave a gap. So basically, if your show's a little bit before mine, I'm unlikely to be able to see it. But I used to not go and see anything else because I had my head too much in my ass. And now I love going to see
I can't do
other
this
things
every
at the
night.
Fringe.
I do it
Yeah.
about 2 or 3 nights a week.
Yeah,
There's,
you just
there's
can't
no
be the
way you
audience
can go
member you
every
want to
night.
be, basically, or
But
that the show deserves.
yeah,
If you're going to tons and tons and tons, if you're going to 5, 6 things a day,
yeah,
you've got to like
yeah.
have a break, have a
It's
breather.
yeah,
And I think at the Fringe, I try and see stuff that isn't comedy as well. You know,
yeah,
go and see
yeah.
some dance, go and see some
Plays and
theatre.
music and
So it's
whatnot.
like a
Yeah,
palate cleanser.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, it's one of the great things about this blog is watching how comedians develop, and you're a classic example. I first saw Alan Davis in a hut, a Peter Kay in a small pub, Michael McIntyre in a hut at Edinburgh, Sarah Millican, as you say, and watching them grow and develop is joyous, just wonderful. And you're so deserve the success. You really do. If that's what you want to do, if you want to keep going, there's so many a level that gets so high, and then they think, I really want to do it, and but they stay there for a while. But you need to, if you want to go and get it, you go and get it, because you're just one of my I shouldn't have favourites, but you're one of my favourites.
Oh, thanks, Rich.
You
That's kind.
always
Thank
made me
you.
cry with laughter.
Oh,
It's
thank
lovely.
you. Well, I mean, it's not, there's no lack of ambition on my part. I'll
No,
keep going for as long as
please
people want to
keep
come and
going.
keep laughing, and I
And I'm
can keep
looking
growing that
forward to seeing
audience.
you in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I'm
Not in
hoping to,
Edinburgh, in Leicester.
well, in Leicester with Hoovering Live, but also I haven't set it up yet, but by the time this goes out, I will have. But this tour, there's shows it right through till June, and
Yeah.
then I intend to end it, or I do intend to do a short run in a bigger venue than normal in Edinburgh with metal.
Well, I'm
So
definitely going to go and see Metal as well, but I'll see the
thank
Hoovering
you.
podcast in Leicester.
Right,
Just
thank
before
you.
we go, is there anything else you'd like to say? Have you, we've mentioned your podcast. What are your social media outlets?
Oh, my social media is just at Jessica Fostekew on everything, and I have a special that will be free on YouTube by the time this goes out, of my 2022-23 show Wench. So
Brilliant.
that's available and free to watch on the stream online now. So I'd love
And it
people
is
to watch that if they
fantastic,
want.
because
Thank
I've
you.
seen it twice.
Oh, thank you.
And as I said, please keep doing what you do. It's been
Thanks,
joyous
Poppy.
talking
You
to
too,
you.
please. Thank you for being such a lovely
I've been
presence
after speaking
in
to
our
you for a
world.
while, and I'm so pleased for your time today. It's been
My pleasure.
wonderful, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again very soon. Take
Pleasure.
care and all the very best.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.